Hello everyone, welcome to the next session of SAP HANA online training tutorials. In this session, I'm going to explain about SAP HANA Studio look and feel. So we'll see what is HANA Studio, why do we need that, and how it looks like, and what are the different things that we can do using HANA Studio. So in our last couple of sessions, I was explaining HANA is combination of both hardware and software. So what is that hardware and software? So I told it's a combination of hardware and software. We know when it comes to hardware, it's our database. And what is the software component? Software component is nothing but HANA Studio. Why do we need HANA Studio? So for any database, you need to have a front-end application or front-end UI, user interface, from where you can manage your database. You can do your operations on the database. So let's take existing databases, Oracle. For Oracle, you have Toad or you have SQL Developer. Let's take MS SQL Server. So you have SQL Management Console. So in the same way, every database has its own front-end UI from where you can manage that particular database. So in the same way, to manage or to perform all kind of activities on your HANA database, the software component or the front-end UI is HANA Studio. So HANA Studio is an Eclipse-based tool. So HANA Studio is an Eclipse-based development and administration tool for working with HANA database. So either like if you want to create your projects or creating development objects or deploying them, as a developer, or if you want to do administration activities like if you want to start or stop the HANA system, or if you want to see how your server components are working, or if you want to see what are the different sessions that are currently running, or what are the different queries that currently running in the on the system, or if you want to see what are the most expensive statements that have run on HANA system, or if you want to see the alerts that has raised on your database. So all these kind of things can be performed, can be seen using HANA Studio. So it's a software component and it's a desktop based one. So you can install on any of the desktop, and once you install it, you can connect to your HANA system. Okay, now let's get into our HANA Studio and see in a real time how it looks like. So let me get into the system. Okay, so this is the system I have, and if you see, I have already installed HANA Studio and I have my shortcut available here. So what you can do is, if you want to install your HANA Studio newly, there are two ways. Either you can ask your company administrator to give you the downloaded version, or you can also download from sen.sap.com. So if you go to sen.sap.com, or you can just search in Google SAP HANA Studio free download, and this will take you to your developer center, from where you can go to SAP Studio installation. Okay, and then you can get into that. Then you can pick your studio you want. So this is one way of downloading your HANA Studio, or the other way is just send a mail to your administrator. They'll be having the downloaded version of a latest HANA Studio, and they will send you that so that you can install it in your desktop. So once you install that, it takes a couple of minutes to install your HANA Studio. Then you are going to get this one. So when you have this, just double click on it. and then it opens your HANA Studio front-end UI. So initially, as I've already added all my credentials, it is showing like this. However, if you open HANA Studio first time, it doesn't look like this. Go to help and welcome. So this is how it looks when you first time open your HANA Studio after installing it. So if you see here, you have different options here. So these are called perspectives. So for each role you have in HANA, you have different perspective here. Let's say if you are an administrator, you have administration console. If you are a modeler, you have modeler console. If you are a developer, where you will be writing your JavaScripts, all those things, you have development console. Or if you are an administrator and you want to perform upgrades to your HANA Studio, or if you want to perform upgrades to your HANA database, that is where you have got your lifecycle management. So this is about the major functionalities or major roles you have in HANA. So in the last video or in the last session, when I explained about deployment options, I've told you you can use HANA as an enterprise system, or you can also use HANA as a database to your existing applications. So let's say when you are using HANA as a database to your existing applications, like ECC on HANA or BW on HANA, so you should able to do manage those applications also from HANA Studio. That is where you have got your ABAP, because if you are having ECC on HANA or BW on HANA, because those applications runs with ABAP, not with SQL. So you need that ABAP development functionalities as well in HANA Studio. So that is where you have got ABAP development screens here. And as well as if you are a developer, you have got core data services, which is relevant to your modeler here. A developer here, open development. And so those are the different options you have here. And in the same way, now once you decide, like let's say I am a modeler, I want to get into my modeler perspective. So you can click on this modeler perspective, and this will take you to your main screen. So this is going to be your main screen. And initially when you open for the first time, you won't be having anything here. So let me remove it, and I'll show you how to do from initial steps onwards. Okay, so this is how it looks when you open it. Now you can't do anything here unless you have connection to your database, connection to your HANA database. So you don't have any connection here. So you need to add a new connection to your HANA Studio, which can connect to your HANA database. Then you can perform all the activities. So this entire screen is called one perspective. So if we look at the hierarchies that we have, first you have got your welcome screen, from where you can select perspective. So based on the perspective you select, you will get different views. What is view? A view is called one section here. So see, this is one view where you have these systems. So this is called a navigation view or system view. And the another view you have is here, a where user list. So this is one view. Okay, and this is your quick launch screen. This is the main screen for any modeler, where you have shortcuts for all kind of modeling things that you can do in HANA. And you also have another views. Let me open this. This is job log view. So usually this comes in the below section. Let me put it there. See, I just clicked on that. Now let me click this one itself. So you've got your properties view, because when you select any object, this particular window shows you what are the properties relevant to that particular object. and you have got your job log view here, and this one is history, and this is a progress. This shows if there are any jobs currently running with your user in HANA. Okay, so these are the different views. So the hierarchy goes like this. You have your welcome screen, then you select the perspective you want to enter, and then you get different views based on the perspective you have selected. Now, how can we add any system to this HANA Studio? Before we do any activities, you need to have a system connection. So to add any system, you can click here. You can click this down arrow mark and then click on add system, or right click anywhere in this area and then click on add system. So once you select add system, you will get this screen where you have to enter your system information. The first thing is you need to have your host name, that is HANA database host name. So you can get all these details from your HANA administrator, and then you have to enter instance number. Instance number always varies from 00 to 98. It's a mandatorily a 2-digit number and can vary from 00 to 98. And then you can have a description for this particular system. I'll just put HANA development system and then click on next. So this here it will ask for username and password. Enter those credentials. If you want to store this username and password, select this and then click on finish. Okay. Maybe I think instance number is 05. See, so I forgot that instance number is 05. As I told you, it can, while installing the HANA database, you can choose your instance number anywhere between 00 to 98. Okay, so now once the system is successfully added, you have got your system details here. So this is going to be your system ID, which is going to be a 3 digits, 3 characters length. So right now I have HTQ. So in the same way you can select while installing the database. And this is the description. This is my username. And if it shows green means system is running fine. We don't have any issues with the system. Okay. Now, once you open that system, you have got 4 main categories here. You have got catalog, you have got provisioning, you have got content, you have got security. Now let's see what are the different, what is the definition of these 4 and how to use those things. So the first thing is catalog. So catalog stores all the database objects. So when we say a database objects, so usually in any database, when you have a new user created, you are going to get a new schema. So schema is going to be collection of all the objects that you are going to create with your username. So when we talk about schema, now my user is Venkatesh, so I should be having my own schema. See, if you look at here, I have my own schema. So under this, I can create these many different objects. So I can create tables, I can create views, I can create triggers, I can create synonyms, sequences, procedures, indexes, functions. So I can create these many objects. So whatever the objects I'm going to create with my username, all those objects will be stored under this particular schema. Now let's say I want to see what are the tables I have under my user. See, so these are the tables I have under my user. Now let's say I want to create a new table as a testing purpose. So how you can create a new table here? So just select your schema and then click on this SQL console, this SQL symbol, or you can right click on your schema and say open SQL console. When you open this, you can write SQL create column table, because this columnar storage structure, right? So you have to specifically mention create column table. I'll just put test table and then I'll give ID as my first column name, which is of integer data type, and then text, which is of varchar 50. So to execute this, you just select this statement and click on this green arrow mark, or F8. F8 is a keyboard shortcut. So click on this. Now you can see this particular one is successfully executed. So now to see that, what I'm going to do is right click on my tables folder and then refresh. See, I've got my test table here. So this way, whatever the objects you are going to create with your username will be stored under this particular schema. Now let's say I want to have another schema, because in most of the projects you will be having a data from different source systems coming to HANA, and you cannot store all the data coming from different sources in one schema. You need to have separate schemas for each source system. So in such cases, you cannot go ahead and create users for all the sources. You have to manually create schemas. So how you can create schema? You can create schema using an SQL statement, which is create schema, schema name. I'll put test schema owned by my user. So I'm going to be the owner of this schema. So select that statement and then execute. So this is successfully executed now. Once this is successfully executed, if you want to see that schema, go right click on your catalog folder, refresh. See, now you have got test underscore schema here. So now I want to create one table under this schema. I don't want under my user. So if I execute the same statement, this will give me an error saying cannot use duplicate table name, because this table already exists under my user, under my schema. So how can I create a table under this schema? So you have to specify the schema name as well. So what I'll do, I'll put test schema dot test table, which means I'm specifically giving order to the system saying that okay, you have to create this table in this schema. If you don't specify the schema, by default it creates in your own schema. So now go ahead and execute this. This has executed successfully. So now if you go to your test schema and open tables, you should see test table. So this is how the catalog folder looks and what catalog folder stores, and how to do some simple operations on your catalog objects. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'll remove the schema. So drop schema, schema name. So schema name is test underscore schema. Now go ahead and execute this. Cannot drop without cascade, because this schema already has one table. So before we drop that schema, before you delete that schema, you have to delete the table under that schema first. So I'll go with drop table. Here also you have to mention schema name dot table name, otherwise it will drop the table that is created under your schema. So put test schema dot test table. So this is successfully executed now. Now you can go ahead and drop your schema. See, now this is successfully executed. Now if I go ahead and refresh, I should not see test schema here. See, you don't have test schema. So these are some of the basic operations that you can perform with your catalog objects. We'll see more in detail when we go to modeling part as part of our training tutorials. So this is about catalog. Then the next thing is provisioning. So this provisioning is actually introduced from SP6 onwards. Yes, SP6 onwards. Before that, we had only catalog content security, but this provisioning has been introduced when they first introduced smart data access. So provisioning is for smart data access. So what is smart data access? So when we are talking about in-memory database, where you are going to have entire database as a RAM, it's obviously going to be expensive. So you need to be very specific about what kind of data you are going to load into HANA and what is the value that it provides to you. So you should not just dump all the data from source to HANA, because there will be data where you rarely use to do any analysis, to perform any analysis, or you don't actually look in details into the data, where you just need some aggregated information from that data set or summary information from that data set. In such cases, you can actually access the data without loading into HANA. So it's like accessing virtually. So virtually access your source data and then write queries on that. So that virtual access of data, virtual accessing of data is nothing but smart data access, where you are going to have data in your source system itself, but you just create connection with your source system and then access those tables. So how you are going to access? You create the smart data access configuration, and then once the configuration has been done successfully, you can create virtual tables on top of those source tables. So these virtual tables are will act as views, where it doesn't store any data, but it simply access data from your source. So that is where you have provisioning, where you can see the existing configurations, and this is like to administrator your existing configurations. Right now you can only see the configurations that has been created by your user. So I have not created any configurations, that's why it's not showing anything. Once you create any configuration with your username, then you can monitor those configurations, configuration details here, like when it has started and what are the SQLs that are running with that particular configuration, and then how many rows it has been accessed, and then what is the remote source name, from which source you are actually accessing the data. All that administration part can be done in this particular tab for your smart data access connections. If you want to create a new connections, you can create, just right click on this and then a new remote source. If you want UI based configuration setup, or if you can write your own SQL, if you know the syntax to create that connection, smart data access connection, then you can write the syntax directly in SQL console. In the same way, even for tables also, see, I have showed you how to create table using SQL syntax. If you don't know the SQL syntax to create any table, still you can create. So what you can do is, you can right click on your folder, right click on tables folder, and then see, if you go to, if you have you have option for new virtual table. So this is actually for your smart data access. So if you want to create a standard table, you go to new table and then you get a UI. So where you no need to write any SQL statement. So what I can do is I'll give my table name here. Let's say test table 1, and I'll select in which schema you want to create this table. So by default it gives you your schema. If you want to create it in other schema, you can select what kind of schema you want to create. And then you can also choose what kind of a table you want to create: a row store, column store, a table type. I'll explain you the difference between these three when we enter into modeling section. So right now our default is going to be column store table. And then now what columns you want in the table. So you give the name, and then you select the data type. I'll put integer, and then if you want this as a primary key, you can select here. And then you can also add comment ID number, which is going to be a descriptive information for this particular column. And if you want to add additional column, click on this plus mark, then I'll put name. You can select the data type here, where I'll go with nvarchar, and then specify the length. Then you can add a descriptive thing here. So once you have added all the columns, go ahead and execute this. So now your table has been successfully created. So if you go and expand your tables, you should see another table. So if you don't know the SQL also initially, but it's always recommended that you should have knowledge about SQL when you're going to work on HANA, because in a complex scenarios you need to have SQL experience. But in initial days, when you don't have that much experience with SQL, you can still do all your basic operations with a UI, even though you don't remember the syntax to create those things in SQL. Okay. So coming to our provisioning. So this for smart data access, and this option smart data access is to do the administration on your existing connections, and the remote sources is where you are going to create your new connections. So the next thing is content. So content actually holds all the modeling objects you are going to create in the system. Okay. So what is modeling objects? So when you have source data available in HANA, that is going to be your raw data, as is data from your source to HANA. So how you are going to apply a business logic, or how you are going to apply transformations on the data sets, on the data you have in HANA. So all the transformations, those joins, logical operations, business logic, everything can be applied by creating a modeling objects in HANA. So all the modeling objects are grouped as packages. So this symbol says it's a package. Under each package you can create different modeling objects. Okay. So the hierarchy for your content is going to be, or in any HANA instance or a database that you add to your HANA Studio, you are going to have catalog, and then provisioning, content, security. So in the catalog, you are going to have schemas. So catalog is group of your schemas, and schema is group of your database objects. So when we say database objects, it can be table, it can be view, it can be trigger, it can be index, it can be functions, whatever it is. So all those objects will be grouped as one schema. Okay. Now provisioning, you have administration and remote source details. Now when it comes to content, then you have package. Group of packages is nothing but your content folder, and then your package contains modeling objects. So this is the structure. till now. So what are the modeling objects we can create in HANA? So you can create attribute views, you can create analytic views, you can create calculation views, and then you can also create procedures and decision tables. So what is attribute views? So before we explain about attribute views, analytic views, let's look at our star schema model, which is the famous model in any data warehousing application. What is star schema? So star schema is nothing but transaction data grouped by master data. So what do we mean by transaction data? Transaction data is nothing but where you have your measures or where you have your facts. So facts in the sense, when we are talking about sales information, what is going to be your measures? How you are going to measure your sales? Based on how much quantity you have sold or based on how much revenue you have got. So that revenue and quantity are going to be your measures or your facts, which are measurable things, because based on that only you determine how much sales you have done and how much growth you have got. So those two are nothing but your measures or facts. So the table that contains your measurable things or facts is called transaction data or transaction table. So table that contains facts or measures. Okay, now you have identified what is the transaction data. Then what about master data? So master data is nothing but the additional information that you get for your basic values or basic attributes. So it's like you have got your transaction data now, where you are going to have what is your sales order number. Let's write down here. Let's put a table. Let's assume this is our transaction data. So you have customer number, you have product number, you have the quantity that is been sold, the amount, then discount. Okay, now if you want to do any analysis on this, you can only do, okay, by customer, how much quantity I have sold and what was the amount I got, or by product number, I can see how much quantity I have sold and what is the profit or revenue I have got. But I want to see how much sales I have done in each region, or how much sales I have done in different countries. Okay, or I want to see how much sales I have done by product categories. Okay, or how much sales I have done by product type. So all this state, region, or product type, product categories, all additional information for your customer and product. Okay, so those are the additional information that belongs to your customer ID, customer information or product information. So all such kind of data is used everywhere, not only in sales. I'll use same customers information in my manufacturing, or I'll use same customers information in my procurement. So that is a central information, and it cannot be stored in your transaction data tables. So that has to be stored separately, which can be used for all your different modules in the organization. So that will be stored as separate tables. So you are going to have, oops, So you are going to have your customer information table where you will have customer number, what is the state, what is the country, what is the region. So when you want this additional information for your customer in sales orders, you join these two tables. Then you get all this additional information. Then you can do additional analysis. You can do the sales by state, you can do the sales by country, you can do the sales by region. In the same way, we are talking about having product. So you have got your product ID. Let's put it as same product name, product number. You have got your product type. You have got your product category. You have got your some manufacturing plant. So now if you want this additional information for your product, join these two tables based on product number. You have got all this additional information. So this centrally accessible data is called your master data, which gives you additional information for your base columns or base information. So your customer number is going to be a base information, and if you want additional information for that, you need to access these centrally accessible tables. So this is called your master data. So whether it is customer table or product table, this is called master data. When you join your master data tables with your transaction data, that is where you get star schema. So it's like forming the star. How you are going to have, you will have your central object. So these like you have your central object, which is transaction data table, and then you start joining your master data for that. So this is going to be your transaction table, and then these are all going to be your master data tables. So now you can join them. So all these joins will be based on your key columns. So it's like our customer number, product number. You are going to have different master data tables, then different key columns. So now this looks like your star in a normal world. So that is it. They put the name as star schema for this. So now how this is relevant to our modeling objects. So we have different modeling objects here, right? So usually your master data will be created using attribute views. So all the master data objects will be created with the help of attribute views. Now analytic views. Analytic view is nothing but your star model. So attribute view master data objects are dimension tables. So the other definition for this is where your fact table is surrounded by dimension tables. So dimensions are nothing but your master data. Fact table is nothing but your transaction data. So in this case, you have all the master data information or dimensions will be created using attribute views, and your star schema is nothing but analytic view. So where you are going to have your fact table or transaction data table, and all these different dimensions are going to be attribute views. So in the analytic view, you will join all the attribute views. And the basic thing we have to remember is whatever the modeling objects we are going to create in HANA, except these procedures, all these modeling objects are runtime objects, which means those objects doesn't store any data physically. It doesn't store any data physically. It just acts as a view which fetches data from your source tables in runtime. When you execute those objects, it's just going to fetch you data from your source. It doesn't store any data physically. That is one of the major advantage with HANA, which means you are not storing data multiple times in HANA. You're actually storing data in your source tables, and then whatever the modeling objects you are going to build, all the modeling objects are views. So which will fetch you the result data set in a runtime. So that actually saves you a lot of database size in a real-time projects. Okay, now see, we talked about star schema. Now we were able to achieve that star schema using analytic views itself. Now why do we need calculation views? One of the limitation with analytic view is, let's say here we talked about one fact table. Now I want to have measures or facts from two different fact tables in the same model. So in such cases, you cannot have measures from two different fact tables in one analytic view. Okay, so the limitation with analytic view, cannot have measures from more than one fact table. Okay, so this one limitation with analytic view. So now where if you need a measures from two different tables, then what you have to do is build two different analytic views, one with one fact table, another one with the second fact table, and then you can combine those two analytic views in the calculation view. So calculation view is basically for complex scenarios. Calculation view. So using calculation view, you can combine two different analytic views, or you can combine attribute view and analytic view, or you can combine analytic view and a base table, or you can combine attribute view and a base table. So you can do all sorts of combination joins in a calculation view. So you can perform either join or union in calculation view, and then so all these are going to be a UI based. So if we get into our system, let me get into our system. So now this is what I explained, right? So we have got our content, and then we have got our packages. So under packages, you are going to have your different modeling objects. Now if I open attribute view, so you just double click on that, and then you can see data foundation, where I have selected different tables and I have joined. So all these are my base tables. So I have this table in my how to do schemas. So I've joined all those tables, and I have selected what are the fields I want for output, and those output fields you can see here. And if you observe, when I select any particular modeling object, I've got a where user list which says in which objects this particular object has been used. And when I select either data foundation or semantics, I've got properties of this object also. I mean, what schema has been used, and number of column, how many number of columns it has in output, all those things. And if I go to semantics also, I've got all my properties of this particular object. So now once you have got the object, if you want to see the data from this modeling object, you can go ahead and see, click on this data preview option here. So you can go to raw data. So within 31 milliseconds it took, I've got my data. And the another advantage you have here is you can do quick analysis here itself. So what are the things I have? I have my region information here, and this is my customer IDs. So I want to see how many customers I have in different states. So this is my country column, sorry, land one. So if I go to analysis, you go ahead and select land one to your label access, and then KUNNR into your value access, which by default takes count. So I can quickly see I have, you can also change it to table format. So I can see I have a lot of customers in Denmark, and I've got next customers here, next highest customers here, and I've got around 4K customers in US. So I can quickly do my basic analysis here itself in HANA. So that's one of the advantage you have got with different types of options you have when you see the data. And you can also see the distinct values you have got for each column. So it shows like here itself you have got all the analysis, basic analysis you need on that particular data set. So in the same way, you can see your analytic views. So I told you, right, where you are going to select your transaction table or fact table, and then you join that with your attribute views, which forms your star schema. So this is going to be your analytic view. So if we look at these two, all these are UI based, user interface, where you select and then click on next and then select the required fields, then activate that and then see the data preview. So in the same way, you can also look at your calculation view. So this calculation view is not yet active. So how you can identify that is you have a rhombus symbol here. So if you have that rhombus symbol, which means it is not active yet. Okay, let me show you some other calculation view. So this has got some inconsistencies. If you see here, this has that red exclamatory mark, which means it has some got inconsistencies. So you can activate that to see the inconsistencies, but we don't need that now. What I'm looking is I just need some calculation view to show it to you and explain. Okay, let's see. Yeah, here I've got one calculation view which is active. Okay, this is one example which will be useful. Let me get the other one. See, so this is a UI based calculation view where we have performed a union on two different analytic views. So this is a best example that I told you here, where if you need measures from two different fact tables, and that cannot be achieved with one analytic view, so you have to create two different analytic views using two different fact tables, and then you can do union on those two analytic views in calculation view. So this is a calculation view using UI, user interface. So you also have an option in calculation view where you can write your own logic directly. So if you feel that whatever the options you have got in UI doesn't fulfill your requirement, you can go ahead and write your own logic, which means you can go ahead and write your own SQL script like this. So these also calculation view, and the earlier one I showed also calculation view. So you can write your own SQL here. So when it comes to calculation views, okay, calculation views can be created using GUI, graphical user interface, or you can also create calculation views using script, SQL script. Okay, so the only challenge or the only disadvantage with calculation views using SQL script is, as we are going to write our own code, it might be ineffective for the system and it may take some time when it compares to calculation view using graphical user interface. That's why what SAP did is, when you want to go for a calculation view using SQL script, they have given an option to go with CE functions. So CE functions is nothing but calculation engine functions, so which are effective when you run on HANA, because these calculation engine functions are very well understandable to a HANA database rather than writing SQL script. SQL script in the sense writing your own SQL. So in architecture part, which is going to be our next lesson, I'll explain you why CE functions are more advantage, gives more advantage when it compares to your SQL script, and I'll also give you the reason. For now, you can create calculation views in 3 different ways. One is using graphical user interface, or using SQL script, or using CE functions. So these are 3 different ways of creating a calculation view. So the other modeling object we have is procedures. So procedures are basically used to move a data from one object to other object. So one object to other object in a sense. So it's like, now we are talking about, the modeling objects doesn't store any data. All it does is, in runtime, it performs all the joins or calculations we have created, and it will give you the result data set. You will get a scenarios where the logic you need to apply is very complex, and that cannot be developed with 1 or 2 objects, where you have to create 5-6 objects, and then you have to take the output of those objects, and you may get a situations where you need to store that output from those modeling objects into a database table and then build a reporting objects on that tables. So it's like you have your source tables here. Okay, so this is like table 1, table 2, table 3, and then you have built your modeling objects on top of this. So you have built modeling object on these tables. Now you want to take the output of these modeling objects and put it into a table again, a database table in another schema. I'll just keep this as table 1 itself. So you want to put it in. So what you are doing is, you have either 5-6 source tables and you are building modeling objects on top of that, and you are converting the data from 5-6 tables into 2 tables, from where you can build the final modeling objects which can be consumed by reports. So in these cases, how you can move data from these modeling objects into physical table? You need to insert the data. Take the data from this, select, and then insert into these tables. So this is where your procedures comes into picture. So you can write a procedures to move data from your to move data from one place to other place in HANA. So it can be from modeling objects to other tables, or it can be from a table to table. So you can write procedures. So this is where a procedures comes into picture. Okay. Now the other modeling object we have is decision tables. So decision table is nothing but a building if-else logic, like building n number of case statements. So it's like I have a sales information in my table, same table, let's take. Okay, I have my sales information here. Now what I want to do is, if customer number is 3, I want to give a discount, additional 10% discount. If customer number is 10, I want to give additional 10% discount. So after applying all those conditions, I want to see the difference between the actual amount I get and the amount I get after giving those additional discount. So before I go ahead and give some offers to the customers, I want to forecast my revenue, whether I am going to get profit or whether I am going to get loss. So in such cases, if you want to build a huge if-else case statements, if statements are case statements where you will be applying such kind of conditions, all such kind of conditions can be achieved using decision tables. So once you apply those conditions, you can execute those decision tables and you can see the result data set, which will show you what is the difference between the actual amount and after discount amount you are going to get. So let me put it here. So decision tables are used to build huge if or case statement logic. Okay, so these are about decision tables. So these are the different modeling objects we can create in content under packages. So these are about the third folder or third category we have in a system view. Now comes the fourth one, security. So the security holds your users and roles information. Okay, so you are going to have all the list of users that you have in the HANA system and what are the different roles you have created. So all these roles will be assigned to users based on their security level. So all this administration relevant, user relevant information will be available under users. So we have hierarchy here, right? So under security, you are going to have users and roles. So this is about our modeling screen and what are the options you have in modeling screen and what are the different modeling objects you can create and how those modeling objects differs from one to other. So in the next session, I'll explain about what are the options we have in quick launch screen and about other perspectives we have in HANA Studio. Thank you for watching. Have a good day and happy learning.